This is the Unregistered podcast, and I'm Thaddeus Russell. This is a show about ideas, people, and behaviors that are considered inappropriate, out of bounds, or beyond the pale. The things you're not supposed to talk about if you're a school teacher, a college professor, a businessman, a politician, a parent, a neighbor, or even a podcast host. These are the things you're not supposed to say or even think if you're a good liberal, a good conservative, or a good citizen. Each week, I'll interview a person who has something bad to say. They might be a journalist or a professor. They might be a porn star or a drug dealer. They might just be an ordinary person with an ordinary job who doesn't care about the rules of polite society. I'm not interested in breaking the rules just to be a troublemaker. I'm interested in people who break the rules of conventional thought and to expand the scope of what is possible to say in our society. I'm interested in people who make me think. At the recent Unregistered weekend in Chicago, we held the debate of the century between Ben Burgis and Curtis Yarvin. Before the debate, I conducted individual interviews with Ben and Curtis. And this is my interview with Curtis Yarvin. Well, I am still in Chicago, and I'm now with Curtis Yarvin. And Curtis, you've been making the rounds a lot. I wanted to tell you...
Making the rounds.
You've been making the rounds, and I'll tell you, you've been making the rounds in ways you don't even know about. My son started at the University of California at Davis just 2 months ago. First day on campus. He's walking. This is UC Davis, big state school, middle of California.
Good for wine.
Good for wine. Good for agriculture. The first kid he met, he said, "So where are you from?" And my son said, "Oh, I'm from California." And he said, "So have you heard of Curtis Yarvin?" My son immediately reported that to me. And I said, "Guess what?" Well, I mean, you are, I think, entering the mainstream, I suppose would be the phrase, at least in the consciousness of the mainstream. I wasn't sure I even wanted to talk to you about this, but I am curious. I mean, I saw you on the Young Turks, which was very interesting. I was
super gassed being on the Young Turks.
Yeah, I've been on the Young Turks. I've been on Jank Show too. Yeah. It is fun. And what do you think about this?
What do I think about the Young Turks?
Being out there, being known.
I don't know. You know, I try not to consume my own propaganda, or I don't read stuff that's written about me, which I think is a very good policy for anyone who's a writer. And so, yeah, I kind of have no opinion, really.
No opinion?
No opinion. I don't want to get into that feedback loop.
Okay. Then let me ask you about democracy. I'm curious if you've ever had any positive feelings toward it.
Well, you know, we'd have to define what it is, in a sense. And, you know, the point that I like to raise is that there's a country that whose formal name is the DPRK. And if you look at the DPRK, it contains the name of the country, contains 3 synonyms for democracy. That would be the D, the P, and the R, and one place name, which is the K. And this country is better known as North Korea, and I would describe it as a hereditary monarchy and not a super great one. And so, you know, do I have... The problem is that sort of this brand of democracy is sort of associated with everything good and is something that people kind of use. It really sort of is an assertion of legitimacy in today's world. And so, you know, I think that there are many things that are both legitimate and good. I think that that is not at all uncommon. I think that there's a lot of ways in which the U.S. government is doing an absolutely great job. And, I mean, there's some ways. You know, then there's so sort of as a general approval of legitimacy, I can sort of, you know, kind of naturally a rebel, but like I can assert the case for the legitimate and mainstream based simply on the fact that it's legitimate and mainstream. You know, there's an older Christian doctrine that will tell you that basically power, I mean, this is what, say, just the Maester would say. He would say, you know, all power comes from God, and therefore when we see power, you know, we should respect it even if we have some criticisms of it. And I believe that respecting the powers that be is very, very important. I'm a big, you know, advocate of compliance in general. I don't believe in civil disobedience at all. So that's sort of one way in which I respect democracy. Another way is to say, okay, let's take this word literally and let's meet it in its literal sense, which is the sense in which I think most, certainly the progressive mainstream in this country would say, rather than democracy, they would say populism. And populism is what you say if you want to think of democracy as bad, usually. And it usually is bad, but there are certainly cases in which I think of democracy less as a system of government, because it's just impossible to systematize the reality of like masses ruling. Masses don't rule; they're ruled. But you know, you can certainly see explosions of kind of mass force and mass energy. So if you're looking at the sort of the unorganized kind of mass events that, for example, helped take down the Soviet Union, you know, to some extent Washington played a hand in that, but like not the, you know, there was genuine, spontaneous, bottom-up, you know, energy being exercised there. It's usually, you know, mob rule goes very stale very quickly and kind of naturally corrupts itself. So it sort of shouldn't last. But in terms of, I would be very hard-pressed to say that democracy, in terms of mass power, people power, mob power, I would be very reluctant to say that that has never accomplished a good thing ever. I wouldn't say that.
So, did I hear that you counsel compliance with democracy if you are living in a democratic society?
Well, you know, again, the two meanings of the word are so different. I recommend compliance with any power that rules over you. Like struggling against power is a very, very bad idea. You can like scheme to replace it with some other power, but you shouldn't struggle against it.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that a form of anarchism? There's a passive resistance or a tacit resistance to power.
Yeah, I think I guess there's a lot of libertarians in the audience or former libertarians. And when I think of, and I myself am a recovering libertarian to some extent, and when I think about these issues, I think about a conversation I had about 25 years ago with my first girlfriend, who was describing something that had happened to a previous